And in that small, quiet room, with sunlight falling through the window and two wounded souls sharing their truths, Arav felt something shift inside him. Not pain, not guilt, but a small spark of peace. A feeling he had not known in years. Arav sat there silently, his tears slowly drying on his cheeks. But the heaviness in his chest remained, a mix of pain, relief, and confusion that made it hard for him to breathe. Because even though Mira had told him things he had needed to hear for years, he still felt like there was something missing, something he needed to know. Something that would explain why fate had brought this little girl into his life. Mira watched him with gentle eyes, her small fingers still resting lightly on his arm. And Arav realized how delicate she looked, how fragile her body seemed, and yet how strong her heart was, carrying truths that even adults would struggle to hold. After a long silence, Mira took a soft breath, as if preparing herself to speak again, and she said, "There is something else. Something your mother wanted me to tell you. Something she wanted you to remember for the rest of your life." Arav turned his head toward her slowly, his heart beginning to pound again, because he could feel the importance in her voice, the weight of the words she hadn't yet spoken. "What did she say?" he whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Mira looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shining with sadness and hope, and then she repeated the words she had held in her heart for years. "She told me to tell you, do not hide your love, Arav. You have a big heart. Use it. Share it. Don't run from it like you ran from me." Arav felt a sharp ache inside his chest, a pain that was not from guilt now, but from the truth hitting him hard. Because those words sounded exactly like something his mother would say, full of warmth, full of love, full of understanding. Mira continued, her voice growing even softer. "She said you keep your love locked inside, like you are afraid to care again, afraid to lose again. But she wanted you to know that love is not something to fear." Arav closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink into him, and he felt something deep inside him shift, like a heavy door slowly opening, letting in a little light. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Mira watching him closely, her expression gentle but filled with worry. "There's more," she whispered, her voice trembling now. "She said you deserve a family too. Someone to sit with, someone to talk to, someone to hold, someone who will stay." Arav's lips parted slowly, and his eyes softened in a way he didn't expect, because the idea of a family, a real family, was something he had pushed away for years, something he believed he didn't deserve after losing his mother. But hearing those words from Mira made him question everything he had believed about himself for so long. Why? Why would she say that? He asked in a small voice, as if he were a child again. Mira swallowed hard, her small hands gripping the sides of her wheelchair as she tried to find the strength to say the final words. "Because she knew you would be alone," Mira whispered. "She knew your heart would close. She knew you would bury your feelings. But she didn't want that for you. She wanted you to have someone to love, and someone who would love you back." Arav felt tears rising again, but this time they were different, softer, warmer, filled with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. He looked at Mira, and for the first time, he truly saw her, not as a stranger, not as a child in a wheelchair, not as someone carrying a message from the past, but as someone who had stepped into his life for a reason. Mira took another shaky breath and added, "She said, maybe one day, you would find someone who needed your love too, someone who could help you heal, someone who could be your family." Arav stared at her quietly, his eyes widening slightly as he realized the truth hidden behind her words. Mira lowered her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "She wanted me to remind you that you are not alone." The moment Mira said those last words, Araf felt something inside his chest completely break open. A wall he had built long ago finally collapsing, leaving him vulnerable, open, and strangely free. He slowly reached out and placed his hand over Mira's small hand, holding it gently, carefully, as if she were made of glass. Mira looked up at him, her eyes wide and shining with emotion, and Arav whispered, "You have done more for me than you know. More than anyone ever has." Mira's lips curved into a small, fragile smile, and she responded softly, "Your mother helped me first. I just helped her finish what she couldn't." Arav shook his head weakly, his voice breaking as he said, "No. Mira, you helped me in a way I didn't think was possible." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was completely silent, except for the soft sound of the wind outside the window and the quiet breathing of two hearts slowly finding peace. Sister Maya, standing at the corner of the room, wiped a tear from her own eye because she could see something powerful happening, something healing, something beautiful, something that felt almost like destiny. Mira squeezed Arav's hand gently, gathering all the courage she had left, and whispered the final words that his mother had wanted him to hear. "Your love is not a weakness, Arav. It is your strength, and you deserve to give it and receive it." And those simple words, spoken by a fragile little girl with a wounded past, changed Arav's life forever. The room stayed quiet for a long time after Mira finished speaking, and in that silence, Arav felt something inside him finally settle. Like a storm that had been raging for years had slowly begun to calm. He looked at Mira, really looked at her, and he saw not just a fragile child, not just someone carrying his mother's final message, but a little girl who had lived through pain, loneliness, fear, and still had the courage to speak words full of hope. He gently wiped the tear that slid down her cheek, and when she gave him a small, shy smile, something warm spread inside his heart, something he had not felt in years, a feeling of belonging. "Mira," he whispered softly, "what do you want? What would make you happy?" Mira blinked, surprised by the question, and then she looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers nervously. I don't know," she murmured. "No one has asked me that before." Arav felt a painful tug inside his chest, because he realized how much this little girl had missed, how many simple things she had never been given love. Safety, someone who cared about her voice. "Then I am asking now," he said gently. "Tell me what your heart wants." Mira hesitated, her small shoulders rising and falling as if she was afraid to speak her true longing. She looked down at her wheelchair for a moment, then slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. I just want a family," she said in a voice so soft it almost broke. "Someone who won't leave me behind. Someone who won't forget me. Someone who will stay." Ara felt something inside him snap, not with pain this time, but with certainty. He reached forward, carefully placing his hands on the sides of her wheelchair, lowering himself until he was eye level with her. "You deserve that," he said firmly. "You deserve love. You deserve a home. You deserve someone who will stand by you." Mira's breath caught, and she looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes as if afraid to believe his words. "But who would want a girl like me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Arav shook his head immediately, his voice strong and sure. "I do," he said without a moment of hesitation. "I want you, Mira." Her lips parted in surprise, and her eyes filled with tears that glimmered like tiny crystals. You want to adopt me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Arav nodded slowly, a gentle warmth filling his chest. "Yes," he said. "If you will let me. I want to be the person who stays. I want to give you the home you have always waited for." For a moment, Mira just stared at him. Her breath caught in her throat, and then suddenly tears spilled from her eyes. But this time, they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of joy. relief, and something she had never fully felt before: hope. I want that, she whispered, choking back a sob. I want you to stay too. Arav pulled her gently into his arms, holding her carefully but firmly, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And Mira rested her head against his shoulder, her small hands gripping his shirt as if afraid he would disappear if she let go. Sister Maya, who had been watching quietly from the doorway, covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes glistening with happiness, because she knew that this moment was something magical, two broken hearts choosing each other. After a long, warm embrace, Arav pulled back slightly and wiped Mira's tears with gentle fingers. We will start this new journey together, he said softly. No more loneliness. No more waiting. You are coming home with me. Mira nodded, her smile trembling but full of light. And you won't leave me? She asked in a small voice. Arav shook his head with certainty. Never, he said. Not now, not ever. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about Mira's favorite stories, her dreams, her fears, and the little things she always wanted to do, but never had the chance to. Arav listened to every word as if each one was a treasure. For the first time in years, he felt his heart open wide, welcoming not just Mira, but his mother's love, her last wish, and the life he had been too afraid to live. When the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Mira held Arav's hand tightly as they walked slowly, gently out of the orphanage gates. Thin her arms were, how pale her skin looked, how tired her eyes seemed, as if the weight she carried inside her was far too heavy for a child. After a moment of silence, Sister Maya cleared her throat and began to explain Mira's story, her voice soft and slow, carrying a sadness that filled the room. She told Arav that Mira had been brought to the orphanage 2 years ago, found near a bus station late at night, alone, cold, crying, and severely injured. Her legs had been crushed in an accident, and even though the doctors managed to save her life, they could not save her ability to walk. Arav felt a pang of pain shoot through his heart as he looked at the small wheels of her chair, imagining the fear she must have felt that night, the helplessness, the darkness. Sister Maya continued speaking, saying that Mira had no family, no documents, no one to claim her, and for days she wouldn't speak to anyone, wouldn't eat, wouldn't respond to questions, just stared at the window with empty eyes. She was like a shadow, Sister Maya said quietly, a child who had lost more than anyone should lose. Arav watched Mira closely, noticing the way she lowered her eyes whenever her pain was mentioned, as if she felt ashamed for something that wasn't her fault. Then Sister Maya told him something that made his heart beat faster. One night, about a month after she arrived, she started crying in her sleep, calling for someone, calling for a woman she remembered. Arav's breath caught. Was it my mother? He asked in a trembling voice. Mira didn't look up, but she nodded slowly. Sister Maya continued, saying that Mira often spoke of a woman with warm hands, a gentle smile, and a caring voice, a woman who protected her on the street when she was starving, a woman who sat with her near the temple and fed her warm food, a woman who hugged her like she was her own child. Arav felt tears prick his eyes again, because the description matched his mother perfectly. The shawl she always wore, the kindness she always carried, and the way she never ignored anyone who needed help, especially children. But then Sister Maya added something that made Arav's heart twist painfully. Mira said that on the night of your mother's accident, she was with her. Arav froze, feeling the world collapse around him. What? He whispered. Mira lifted her eyes slowly, and in them Arav saw a deep sadness, a guilt that didn't belong to her. I didn't know she was hurt, Mira whispered. She left me near the bus stop, told me to stay there and wait. She said she had to go somewhere very important, something she couldn't ignore. Arav felt the ground shift beneath him. He remembered that night, too. The night he left home in anger. The night he shouted at his mother, telling her he didn't need her, telling her to leave him alone, a fight he regretted every day since. His mother had gone out after him, looking for him, and never made it back. Mira continued speaking, her voice trembling. She told me about you. She said you were hurting. She said she needed to find you and bring you back home. She said she loved you more than anything. Arav covered his face with his hands, the guilt crashing over him like a wave he could no longer hold back. Sister Maya stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. She didn't die because of you, Mr. Arav. She died trying to protect both of you. But Arav could not hear anything except his own painful memories. The argument, the slammed door, the silence, the regret. Mira reached out with her small hand and touched his arm gently, her touch surprisingly warm and soft. I didn't understand what was happening that night, she whispered. But when I grew older, I remembered her words, and I remembered the sadness in her eyes. She hesitated, her voice breaking. I wanted to find you earlier, but I didn't know your name. Only your mother's voice saying Arav again and again. Arav looked up slowly, tears streaming down his face. His heart breaking as he saw the innocent girl carrying pieces of his past he never expected to see again. Mira took a deep breath and said the words that tightened Arav's chest once more. I wrote letters. Letters to many places, hoping one would reach you. Hoping you would come, because your mother asked me to tell you her last message. Arav wiped his face, his voice shaking. And what is that? He whispered. Mira looked straight into his eyes, her own eyes shining with sadness and love she had absorbed from a woman who was gone. She told me to tell you she never blamed you. Not even for a second. The room fell silent. The kind of silence that holds pain, healing, and truth all at the same time. And Arav felt his entire world shift, not from fear this time, but from a fragile hope he didn't know he still had inside him. Arav sat completely still, as if the world had frozen around him, and the only thing he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Because Mira's words had opened a door inside him that he had kept locked for years. A door filled with pain, guilt, and memories he wished he could erase. Mira looked at him with soft, trembling eyes, waiting for him to breathe, waiting for him to speak, waiting for him to understand the truth she had carried for so long. And Arav felt something break inside him as he realized how unfair it was that this small girl had been holding a burden that was never meant for her. Slowly, he lowered his hands from his face, his eyes red and wet, and whispered, "She never blamed me?" As if saying the words out loud would help him believe them. Mira nodded gently, and even though her voice was weak, her words were clear, steady, and full of the love his mother had once given her. Your mother said you were just a child, Mira whispered softly. She said you were scared that night. Scared of losing people. Scared of the world changing too fast. She said she understood your fear, even when you could not explain it. Arav felt another tear roll down his cheek, and he clenched his fists tightly because the memory of that night flashed before his eyes again, his angry words. The tears in his mother's eyes, the way he ran out of the house without looking back, and how she had followed him into the dark streets trying to bring him home safely. I thought she died because she went looking for me, Arav whispered, his voice breaking as he spoke. I thought if I had stayed home, or if I had apologized, she would still be alive. Mira shook her head firmly, surprising Arav with the strength in her small voice. No, she said with quiet force. She died trying to protect both of us. She saved me before she went after you. She gave me her shawl because I was freezing. She fed me her food because I had nothing. She held me because I was crying. She told me she would return for me, but she never did. Mira's eyes filled with tears now, and Arav felt his heart tighten painfully, because he realized that the girl in front of him had lost something too. She had lost the woman who had shown her kindness, the woman who had promised to come back, the woman who never got the chance. "I waited for her," Mira whispered, her lips trembling as she spoke. "I waited for so many hours." But she didn't return. A man found me near the bus stop and took me to the hospital. They said I had been in an accident, but I don't remember what happened. I only remember her voice, telling me not to be afraid, telling me she would help you, telling me she loved you very much. Arav pressed a hand over his mouth as he listened, because each word felt like a blade made of truth, cutting through the lies he had told himself to avoid facing the pain he carried inside. He wanted to comfort Mira, to hold her hand, to tell her she wasn't alone anymore, but he felt frozen, overwhelmed by the realization that this little girl had been carrying a message from his mother for years, without knowing who he was or how to find him. Sister Maya stepped forward slowly and added in a quiet voice, "Mira remembered the name Arav from that night. She remembered your mother crying and calling your name, but she didn't know who you were or where to find you. So she started writing letters." Arav looked at Mira, surprised, and Mira lowered her head shyly. "I sent letters to schools, companies, temples, anywhere I thought someone named Arav might be," she explained. "Some came back. Some didn't, but then I sent one to your office, because I saw your name in a newspaper once. I wasn't sure if it was you, but my heart told me to try." Arav took a deep breath, feeling overwhelmed by how fate or something bigger had led them to this moment. "Why me?" he finally asked, his voice soft and fragile. "Why did you try so hard to find me?" Mira looked up, her eyes shining with innocence and pain, and said, "Because your mother said you needed to hear her last words. She said your heart was hurting, and she wanted you to heal. She asked me to tell you she loved you more than her own life." Arav felt something inside him crumble completely, something that had been broken for years, finally letting go. He leaned forward, covered his face, and cried openly, not with quiet tears, but with deep sobs that he had kept locked inside him since the day his mother died. Mira reached out with her small hand and touched his arm gently, saying softly, "Please don't cry." She didn't want you to cry. She wanted you to live and love, and be happy again. Arav looked up at her through blurred eyes, seeing not just a child in a wheelchair, but a child who had become the keeper of his mother's final message. A child who had suffered her own pain yet still carried hope for him. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Thank you, Mira, for telling me the truth, for finding me." Mira gave a small, tired smile and said, "I promised her I would. I keep my promises." When he first read the letter, and he took a slow breath as he tried to understand her words, she looked at him with eyes that seemed to read him completely, eyes that made him feel exposed, as if she could see right through the walls he had built around his heart for so many years. "What is your name?" he finally asked, his voice low, almost careful. The girl smiled again, a small smile full of innocence and strength, and said, "My name is Mira." Arav repeated her name softly, and the moment he did, Mira tilted her head slightly, studying him as if she were comparing him to a memory she held inside her mind. "Do you know who I am?" Arav asked, trying to sound calm, but he knew his voice carried a tremble he could not hide. Mira nodded slowly, and her next words struck him harder than he expected. "You are the man my heart told me to wait for." Arav's eyes widened, and he looked at Sister Maya, who stood silently in the corner, watching with gentle worry, but she did not speak, as if she wanted him to hear everything directly from the little girl. Mira looked at him again and said quietly, "You don't remember me, but I remember your voice. I remember the way you cried. I remember your mother. The moment she mentioned his mother, Ara felt as if the floor beneath him shifted, as if he had fallen into a world he did not want to revisit. His throat tightened, and he took a shaky step forward before asking in a broken voice, "How? How do you know anything about my mother?" Mira lowered her eyes, her hands gripping the sides of her wheelchair tightly, and for a moment it looked like she might cry. But she took a deep breath and whispered, "Because she saved me once. And she told me something about you. Something important. Something I promised to tell you when the time was right." Ara felt his heart pounding in confusion and fear. His mother had died years ago. This girl should not know anything about her. Yet she spoke as if she held a piece of his past he had lost long ago. And in that moment, Arav understood one thing clearly. This meeting was not an accident. It was the beginning of something he had no control over. Arav stood frozen in front of Mira, his mind racing in 1,000 directions at once. Because nothing she said made sense to him, yet everything felt strangely familiar. Like a distant echo from a memory he never wanted to touch again. And the room around him felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the truth was slowly closing in on him, whether he was ready or not. Mira looked at him with those deep, calm eyes that seemed to understand more than a child her age should ever understand. And before he could ask her what she meant, she took a slow breath, her fingers trembling slightly on the wheelchair handles. And she asked him in a soft, trembling voice, "Why did you leave your mother alone that night?" The words hit Arav like a sudden punch to the chest, knocking the breath out of him. And he felt his knees grow weak as he stumbled back a step, unable to believe what he had just heard. Because that one painful sentence was something he had never spoken aloud to anyone, not even to himself, and hearing it from a child felt almost impossible. Like she had reached inside his deepest wound and pulled it into the open. His mouth went dry. His heart pounded so hard he felt like the whole room could hear it. And for a moment he could not even look at Mira, because the guilt he had buried years ago came rushing back, filling him like a wave he could no longer push down. How do you know about that?" he finally whispered, his voice broken and unsteady. And Sister Maya watched with concern, but she did not interrupt, as if she knew Mira needed to speak. Mira looked down at her hands, her small shoulders shaking lightly, and Ara saw that she was fighting emotions too, emotions she did not fully understand but carried anyway. "I heard her," Mira whispered, almost as if she were afraid of her own words. Arav blinked, confused and shaken. "Heard who?" he asked, his voice cracking. Mira lifted her head slowly, tears forming in her eyes, and said, "Your mother." Arav's stomach twisted painfully, and he shook his head, unable to accept the impossible. His mother had died years ago. There was no way this child could have heard her, met her, or spoken to her. "This is not funny," he whispered, his throat tight, but Mira wasn't smiling, wasn't joking, wasn't trying to scare him. Her face was serious, innocent, and full of a strange kind of honesty. "I was very small," she continued, her voice soft and shaky, "maybe 5 or 6. I don't remember everything, but I remember crying outside the temple because I had no food. I remember feeling very cold, and I remember a woman coming to me, kneeling down and covering me with her shawl." Ara felt the blood drain from his face. Mira continued, "She had kind eyes, very kind, and she hugged me like she knew me. She talked to me softly. She told me about her son. She told me how lonely he felt. She said she wanted to protect him, but she didn't know how." Araf swallowed hard, his chest tightening with each word, because Mira was describing his mother exactly, the warm shawl she always wore, the way she would kneel and comfort anyone in pain, the softness in her voice, the love she carried even when her life was difficult. Mira wiped her tears with the back of her hand and said, "She told me she was scared that night. Scared for you. She said you were hurting inside. She wanted to tell you something, but she never got the chance. Arav felt his eyes burn, but he tried to stay strong, tried to stay rational, because how could this girl know details only he remembered? This is impossible, he whispered to himself, but deep inside, a part of him knew Mira wasn't lying. Mira took another shaky breath before speaking again, and the next word she said shattered Arav completely. Your mother said you didn't leave her by choice. She said you were just a boy. She said you were scared too. Arav's legs almost gave way, because for years he had believed he abandoned his mother, that he was the reason she had no one with her on the night she died, that his fear had caused her pain, and he carried that guilt like a quiet shadow that followed him everywhere. Mira looked at him with soft, trembling eyes and whispered, She said it was not your fault. Arav pressed his hand over his mouth as tears escaped his eyes, falling silently because he had never heard those words from anyone. No one had ever told him he was not to blame, not even himself. And hearing them from a little girl who should not have known anything about his past felt overwhelming and unreal. Sister Maya took a small step forward, placing a comforting hand on Arav's shoulder, but she stayed quiet, knowing this moment did not belong to her. Mira's small voice broke the silence again. She asked me to tell you when the time was right. Arav wiped his face, trying to steady his voice. Why now? Why me? And how do you? How do you know any of this? Mira blinked, tears rolling down her cheeks, and whispered, Because I carry her memory. And because you came looking for her answers too, even if you didn't know it. Arav took a deep breath. Confused, broken, scared, hopeful, and lost all at once. Because this girl held answers he didn't know he needed. And her words had touched the wound he had hidden for half his life. And in that quiet room, with sunlight falling through the window and two wounded souls staring at each other, Arav realized this was no coincidence. This meeting was fate. And Mira was the key to secrets he was finally ready to face. Arav stood there, staring at Mira with a mix of shock, fear, and confusion swirling inside him. Because every word she spoke seemed to pull him deeper into a past he had worked so hard to bury. A past that still hurt to think about. And as he tried to steady his breathing, Sister Maya gently placed a hand on his arm and said, Please sit. Mr. Arav, you need to hear the rest. Arav nodded weakly and sat on the small wooden chair beside Mira's wheelchair, still trying to understand how this little girl knew things no one else in his life had ever known. Mira looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers nervously, and Arav noticed how. Arav Mehta sat in his tall glass office, high above the city, thinking his day would be normal, like every other busy day of his life, until the moment his assistant quietly entered the room holding a small plain envelope that looked old and worn out. Nothing like the usual business letters Arav received. And when she said someone had dropped it off at the gate without giving a name, he felt a strange chill move through him, even though he had no reason to feel afraid, at least not yet. Arav took the envelope, turning it slowly in his hands, noticing the handwriting on the front, a shaky handwriting, almost as if written by a child or someone in a hurry, and when he opened it, he expected maybe a request for money, a complaint, or even a thank you note from one of his charity programs. But instead, he found a single short message written in blue ink. Please come. A little girl wants to meet you. She knows your secret. For a few seconds, he just stared at the words. Unable to move, his heart beat suddenly loud in his ears. Because no one in his present life should know anything about his past, especially not a little girl. And the fact that the letter came from a small orphanage made the whole thing even stranger. Arav read the note again and again, as if one of the readings would magically change the words or explain them, but the message stayed the same. Simple yet powerful, quiet yet threatening. and it felt like those few words were pulling him backwards in time, dragging him toward memories he had locked away for many years. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath as he felt something heavy inside him, something old, something that hurt to remember, and he whispered softly, "How is that possible?" Arav had built his life on control, on order, on staying far away from anything emotional, and for years he had succeeded, hiding all the pain behind wealth, business, and a busy lifestyle that never allowed him to pause and think about what he had lost or what he had done. But this letter felt like a hand grabbing him from the dark, refusing to let him hide anymore. He tried convincing himself that maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone wanted attention or money, or maybe someone from his past wanted to disturb him. But the line, "She knows your secret," kept echoing inside his mind, breaking every excuse he tried to create. He felt anger rise inside him, not at the child mentioned in the letter, but at the idea that someone knew something they should not know, because Arav believed he had buried his past so deeply that no one would ever find it again. He stood up and walked toward the large window where the city spread out in front of him like a living map, the sounds below barely reaching him, and a strange thought came to him. What if the letter was not a threat at all? What if it was a call for help? A message from someone who truly needed him? The uncertainty made everything more confusing, and for a moment he felt like a young boy again, scared, lost, unsure of what to do. Arav ran his fingers through his hair and read the letter one more time. And this time the words did not feel like a threat, but like a door. A door he needed to open because on the other side might be answers, or truth, or something he had been avoiding for too long. Without thinking much more, he grabbed his car keys and left the office, ignoring the questioning looks of his assistant and the surprised greetings of his employees, because the letter had now become the only thing on his mind. And he could not rest until he knew why a little girl in an orphanage was asking for him. The drive to the orphanage felt longer than usual, even though it was only an hour away. And the whole way he kept replaying the words, "She knows your secret," wondering how a child he had never met could know something nobody else knew, something he had carried alone for so long that it felt like part of his own body. As he drove further from the tall buildings and busy roads toward quieter streets, his chest felt tight, as if something heavy was pressing on it, and memories he had never wanted to face again started to rise. Small pieces of forgotten pain knocking at the door of his mind. He tried pushing the thoughts away, telling himself he was only going to confirm the letter was a mistake or a misunderstanding. But deep inside he knew this visit would not be simple, because nothing connected to his past ever was. When he finally reached the orphanage, a small, old building with cracked paint and a broken gate, he parked his car slowly and sat still for a moment, just breathing, because even though he was a billionaire, powerful in business, fearless in negotiations, and respected by the world, right now he felt like a nervous boy standing at the edge of something he did not understand. He stepped out of the car, the cool air touching his face, and walked toward the entrance, noticing the quietness around the place, the soft sound of children laughing somewhere inside, and a strange feeling that this visit was going to change something in his life forever, though he did not know whether that change would be good or painful. He knocked on the door gently, and as he waited, he whispered to himself the same question that had been haunting him since he read the letter. Who could know my secret? That question felt like the beginning of something big, something dangerous, something emotional. And even though he tried to stay calm, his heart told him that whatever waited for him inside the orphanage was going to shake his world in a way he was not prepared for. Arav stood at the door of the orphanage, waiting for someone to open it. And even though he tried to stay calm, his hands felt a little cold, and his breath felt heavier than usual, because he still did not know what he was walking into. or who the little girl was, or how she could know anything about his past. But he knew he had come too far to turn back now. After a few seconds, the door opened, and a woman in her late 40s stood in front of him with soft eyes and a tired smile. And she looked surprised to see a well-dressed young man standing there with nervous eyes. "You must be Mr. Arv," she said gently, as if she already knew he would come, and he nodded slowly, unable to say anything for a moment. She stepped aside to let him in, and as he walked inside, he felt a strange silence inside the building. Not an empty silence, but a quiet that felt heavy, like everyone inside was carrying some kind of pain or waiting for something to happen. The caretaker introduced herself as Sister Maya and led him through a narrow hallway, where faded paintings made by children hung on the walls. And Arav noticed that some of the drawings had a small girl in a wheelchair, always smiling, surrounded by sunlight, as if she was drawing herself in a happier world. Arav wondered if this girl was the same one who asked for him, and the thought made his heart beat a little faster. Sister Maya walked slowly, speaking gently as she told him that someone had told the girl a visitor might come today. And since morning she had been waiting quietly, without eating, without talking, just looking out of the window as if she already knew he would arrive. This made Arav even more confused, because he still had no idea who she was or how she was connected to him. And the thought that a small child was waiting for him with so much hope made him feel uncomfortable, as if he did not deserve that kind of trust. They reached a small wooden door at the end of the hallway, and Sister Maya stopped there, placing her hand on the door before opening it slowly, and she said softly, "She is inside. Please be gentle. She has been through much more than any child should go through." Arav swallowed hard, feeling a knot tighten inside his chest, and when he stepped into the room, the first thing he saw was a small girl sitting near the window in a wheelchair, her back turned toward him, her thin frame looking fragile and still, as if she were trying to hold herself together. The sunlight from the window fell softly on her hair, making it glow a little. And the moment she sensed someone entering the room, she turned her head slowly toward him, and Ara felt his breath catch when he saw her face. She looked about 10 years old, with big, dark eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope, eyes that looked far too old for her age, eyes that seemed to carry stories she never wanted to tell. Her small hands rested on the arms of her wheelchair, and when she saw Arav, a tiny smile appeared on her face, the kind of smile that looked like it had to push through pain just to show itself. Arav walked closer, unsure of what to say, unsure if he should kneel, sit, or stand, because he had never been good with children, especially children who looked like they had been hurt by life. Before he could say a word, the girl lifted her hand slightly, as if telling him to stop where he was, and she spoke in a soft but steady voice. "I knew you would come." Ara felt a strange chill run down his spine, the same chill he felt